Hello, welcome to City Talking, the Manchester City podcast from the Manchester Evening News with me, Gareth Jones, Simon Bajkowski and Joe Bray. Remember to head to manchestereveningnews.co.uk for the very best coverage of Manchester City. And when you're there, subscribe to our City newsletter and join our City WhatsApp community. That way you can get the very latest City news, opinion, debate straight to your email or phone, so you'll never miss a thing. And best of all, it's totally free. So do please join those today. Joe, how are you both doing?
Yeah, very good. You've got all the pushes in there, Gareth. Nice and early.
Well, this is my first one, so I thought I had to get in straight away to try and impress.
I like
set the tone.
Yeah.
Keep the paymasters happy.
The hosting I've been doing, I think.
Not at all. I just want to really test you two today and really bounce around for the latest news on City. Although we've obviously been talking about England. Do we have to talk about England? A couple of days on from us, that convincing victory that was never in doubt. What's your mood about that and overall of the Euros? I have to say it's affected mine. I've just got no way near as much interest in the Euros as I thought I would have going into this summer, and I think it is mainly down to just England. Sadly, how are you guys feeling?
Yeah, I've made the mistake of getting excited about England pre-tournament, and that has filtered in. But also, I feel like at first everyone was like, "Oh, it's great! It's the 2014 tournament," and now all the teams that are in the sort of last 16 seem a bit rubbish. Like Portugal, Slovenia, and France, Belgium yesterday were both dross. And you're like, well, maybe England do have a chance now because those teams are all rubbish as well. So it's not been a great few days for the football.
I think before the tournament, I was saying on here that I didn't think England would do very well, and that might have been a bit of a just insurance policy for me in case they didn't do well. And they've done even worse than I thought they would do, but somehow are still there and have a presentable draw and could get to the semi-finals and final. And it's very odd that they're not playing well, but they're just doing just about enough. And then, they could beat Switzerland. I think Switzerland are very good. I think Manu Akanji's been one of the players of the tournament, but they could then do that, and the semi-final could be a game that they could somehow maybe win on penalties. It's one of them. It's like when was it when Portugal won it and they weren't very good and they didn't win in the group stage, and then somehow they got through and they just won it. And
I think it'd be more like Greece winning.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was going to say exactly the same. It reminds me of Portugal. Just get through, defensively relatively solid, and you kind of bore the teams to death. Or yes, you could have a Greece. They were defensively solid, weren't they? Maybe Switzerland could be the new Greece, potentially.
Yeah, Switzerland looked good though. Switzerland looked like a team that are well coached, and like Austria and Spain and Germany, obviously, but it's been a tough watch. Not just England. England's been a horrendous watch. I almost didn't want them to equalise. It was that bad. But Portugal last night.
The backlash though, it would have been so bad.
It would have been bad, but I think it would have all been on Southgate because it's very difficult to single out players when all of the players are that bad.
And that's why I'm glad we're through, because I don't even think he deserves it to finish really flatly, which I still think could happen against Switzerland because you say they're a really good team, but we'll have that arrogance of we're England, we've got the Premier League, we should be winning that game, rather than looking and going, actually, there might be a better team than us at the moment. But I just hope it doesn't fall too nastily on him of what he has done, although I think he has had his time. Where does that fit in then? So we're going to talk Man City transfer targets, a few potential exits, Kevin De Bruyne's Belgian rant with a team that has gone out of the Euros in a couple of minutes. So I suppose with Phil Foden, continues to be the chat about England. Seemed to have his best game, incredibly unlucky with a disallowed goal. And to be fair, I don't know how he's standing to play a game having been back to England and back having the birth of his latest child, and congratulations to the family for that. What do you guys think?
I don't know if he stays in the team. I don't know if this is the game where they go, this is the match where we're better without Foden. I still think he's better than Bellingham in the middle. But I don't think Bellingham is going to be dropped. And it's clear that the attack doesn't work. You know, Foden didn't work that well. The disallowed goal was sort of a bit silly. Saka was anonymous. Bellingham did nothing for 94 and a half minutes. And Kane didn't do anything for 95 and a half minutes. So something needs to change in the midfield and the attack. And it would seem obvious to move Foden inside. But if you move Foden inside, then maybe Bellingham isn't that happy and probably more interested in keeping Bellingham happy than he is moving Foden inside. So I don't know if Foden becomes the big name that is dropped, really.
I wonder if you drop Saka instead, because I think it's probably about 50-50, but Foden has done for City that sort of inside right position, and he did it with Walker bombing up on the right. So we've spoken before about Foden having no support from his fullback. The current system doesn't help Foden at all because he's asked to be a left winger that he isn't, and he's got a fullback who doesn't want to come over the halfway line or overlap or play on his left foot. So do you move Foden onto the right, allow Walker to offer that overlap, and then Foden can drift in those positions and it just mixes it up a bit? Then I don't know who you put on the left-hand side, whether you put Watkins or Tony on, because Tony did very well when he came on, or the North East get the Anthony Gordon inclusion that they've been calling for all tournament. I don't know what the answer is, but could that be part of it?
He just doesn't seem to like Gordon, does he? A bit like Maddison. There's something there where I was surprised he didn't come on the other day. I mean, Eze did okay, I thought, actually. But there seems to see something where he doesn't seem to really like Gordon. I mean, you just put Saka at left back
players
again.
And then isn't playing them. He's taken the informed players over the experienced ones like Grealish and Rashford, and you feel like he would want to be calling on Grealish and Rashford rather than Gordon and even Cole Palmer. And I don't think I'm at the Cole Palmer starting stage yet. I think he's a lot better coming on against a tired defence as he has done the last couple of games. But yeah, it feels like he's everything he's doing is to say to people, see, this is what you wanted. And it's almost like he's trying to prove them wrong. And it's like, just if he wants to go and play defensive and accept it and own it. But it just, something's not right. And it feels like the end of a management tenure, doesn't it?
Yeah, and it does kind of feel like this is late era Southgate, like because he's been so good and so progressive for so long, and he's been criticised for being boring for a long time, but his team have always had a plan and they've stuck to it and they've made progress in tournaments. Whereas but he's also been like, you know, the social conscience of the nation and you know, making sure that these young boys can turn into men and be something that like the nation can be proud of. And then it just seems with the last year, the defences of Jordan Henderson for so long. And then, like you say, Joe, this whole like, well, you can have all these players then. I'm going to pick all these players and drop everyone who have been loyal to, and then moan about not having Calvin Phillips when we played terribly. It all feels a bit like Southgate is trying to sort of, just like prove everyone wrong by using their thoughts badly. Even just like, how did Saka end up playing left back 2 days after Roy Keane suggests it or Ian Wright suggests it on ITV? Why is Southgate taking the advice of ITV pundits? And that goes into the whole like England mentality. What on earth is Jude Bellingham doing, calling out fans and critics after he's played like a League Two player for 94 and a half minutes? Why is he quoting Theodore Roosevelt, for goodness sake? Like, why are these England players bothered about people calling rubbish performances rubbish? Like,
they've got to know it's been rubbish though.
Yeah. Like, fine to sort of get motivated by it, but like actually play well then. And then that's the best way for people to stop calling you. They seem offended at being questioned when like they're just doing nothing to justify why they should be praised. And, you know, it baffles me how you can't have an England team with this Phil Foden in it. But I think the best thing for Foden is probably not to be associated with it because it's a sinking ship.
Yeah, I mean that's where Phillips and say a Maguire's stock's probably rising. Man City might get a couple of extra million now for Phillips, just because people go, oh yeah, look how good he is because England aren't good without him in it. This could be a really clever ploy. It could really work for City. This maybe that's what Southgate's doing. Throw a curveball at you. We've all been around long enough. You can smell when, whether it's club or international football, when a kind of era is coming to an end with a certain management type, and you probably need fresh ideas, and probably you say that kind of siege mentality they've got probably comes from that group of players being together. I know there's a lot of new players, but that kind of management team being together for so long, you probably think, yeah, it's probably just they just got fed up of it. They're burnt out and they're a bit fed up of it, and it seeps into the players. So it probably feels like this is whatever happened, Southgate's last hurrah. I was reading some of the City message boards the other day. He said he maybe fancies international football. Last year, the contract. Pep for England?
Yeah. The timing, lines up, as in if Southgate goes this summer, England will want a successor now. And Pep's obviously contracted to City for another year. But I think, at some point in the future, it would not be a surprise at all to see him manage England. There's obvious conflicts with him taking over Spain. I think he's been talked off for sort of Brazil. But England is somewhere where he's been happy for 8 years, 9 years, and could, happily live in Barcelona half the year and still see more than enough of the Premier League. So I think Pep's certainly one to watch for the future for England.
I'm not buying it. I think every time he goes into a big Champions League game, it's all the overthinking and does he change his tactics? I don't think England fans will be able to cope with having a manager so good, but doing maybe some pragmatic decisions. And he would probably do something like, I'm not saying he would play Calvin Phillips, but he'd play a similar player that isn't the fashionable choice to make a point. And all of I don't think it would end as gloriously as it would suggest, personally.
But he would just put it on him, though, wouldn't he? He would say, I'm making these decisions because I'm the best manager in the world. Whereas Southgate seems to be saying, well, if you want these decisions, you can have them. Whereas Pep would just say, no, I'm doing what is best for the team because that's what I think and I know more than you, which usually he does.
He'd get bored, though, wouldn't he? Having the players only a couple of weeks a year.
Yeah. But can someone so intense go on being so intense year after year after year? And maybe it's kind of a semi-retirement or a semi-sabbatical to have a national team, or maybe just turns up at the clubs every week and just shouts at the players from the sidelines, just kind of, doing a coaching job even if he's not supposed to.
I would find it quite funny that he spent so long saying, don't play these players on these international friendlies, please rest them. He's had such an anti-international break stance. And then if he was an international manager, there's no way he wouldn't play his best players. He would play them all for 90 minutes because that's the only time he's got to use them. So I think there'd be a lot of contrast. But yeah, if he was to take over England, it would be completely the opposite of Southgate, wouldn't it? We're looking at probably the most boring tournament football we've had in 4 or 5 tournaments, and it would at least be fun, you would think, with Pep. I can't see it for England, but I don't know. USA have just gone out of the Copa America. Maybe they're looking for a refresh.
Oh yeah, he could do some things there, couldn't he? Well, I think he'd probably pull his hair out. That's obviously the wrong phrase, but with not the lack of quality, that's disrespectful, but the lesser quality, maybe. If we just wrap up the Euros chat before we get on to more localised City stuff, Kevin De Bruyne, Belgium have gone out of the tournament. Unlucky and with a deflected goal, maybe not. They set up defensively, it kind of worked, but didn't offer a huge amount, and they haven't been great in the tournament. He had a rant afterwards in the press conference. Joe, you've written that up on the site, so do check out what's been said and what that maybe means for Manchester City. What have you made to that and say the potential ramifications?
He's just been very vocal this week, hasn't he? It was after the group stage where they didn't play well. They were sort of booed off, and De Bruyne, as captain, ushered his team away and said basically to the fans, if you're going to boo us, we're not going to clap you. And he then said he'd do it again. And he's an emotional man, and he's very, very passionate. And then he's come out and defended their tactics and their performance. And yeah, it did come down to an unlucky deflected goal. But I think their tournament hasn't been good, and this has been coming. And he spoke about his own future, and he basically said he's had no offers, and of course he would consider an offer from Saudi Arabia or whoever offers him an absurd amount of money, as he said, but he's expecting to go back to City, and is expecting contract talks at some point. So in that sense, he's just calmed down that talk, and we can probably assume that De Bruyne's going to be a City player on the back of those comments this season. But when it comes to Belgium, he's hinted at retiring from Belgium duty. He wants to carry on. He loves playing for his country, from what he was saying, but he also said when players go away for international breaks, the players who aren't selected get 10 days off. And he's looking at a season which is going to last 11 months. City could play 75 games. If he plays for Belgium, that's another 10. If he takes those 10 games off and has rest in between, it could prolong his club career or help him get to the end of the season, which he's played a lot of football in his career, but this is going to be another season altogether. So it's going to be interesting. He's not committed either way. As you say, yeah, he was very emotional when he was asked about Belgium's golden generation, and he was saying, well, actually, the golden generation was 2018. It's a completely new squad now, and we can't do the same things. And he called the question stupid as he walked off under his breath, which he's not always good at hiding his emotions, is he? And this was probably the peak of that. So it will be interesting to see what he does, but you could say for City it's good that he's got a couple more weeks to just rest, because he did say, his parting comment was, I need a rest. So it'll be interesting to see what he does over the next few weeks, whether he plays much in pre-season, and then what he does with his international future. And Guardiola in particular might be hoping that he does decide not to carry on with Belgium.
Yeah, it didn't really seem ideal to see him playing so deep against France. De Bruyne, certainly under Guardiola, seems like one of those players who will sort of buck the trend. I think he's mentioned this before, by ending up kind of like further up the pitch when he finishes his career than when he started. I think there is sort of an idea that he could end up as a deep lying playmaker because of his vision, but certainly with City, he's been used more to sort of push the front line and be sort of a guy around the box, whereas it just looked like he was wasted with Belgium. And De Bruyne, as we've seen in his press conference, is not a guy who's sort of got all the time in the world for pleasantries and having his time wasted. He knows how much he's worth, and he knows what his time is worth, and he wants that time to be valuable, because international football, as well as club football, is time away from his kids and his family, and he wants it to be worthwhile. If you look at that Belgium team, is it worth your time? Obviously, there's the honour of representing your country, but he's a very pragmatic guy, and he's a very smart guy. You're talking about a guy who sort of compiled a data report for his last contract negotiations to show how valuable he was. So he gets into the detail, and I'm sure he will again for both the contract talks he hopes to have with City and his decision on Belgium.
I know you guys would have said this before, I'm sure, that like post-match interviews are the worst and hardest to do for both the player and the journalist, isn't it? Because as a journalist, your head's spinning because you've been writing your report or broadcasting whatever, so you're trying to think of the questions and remember the key points of the game. And obviously, they've literally come off the pitch, even in a post-match press conference, which might be 20 minutes later. They're so full of adrenaline. As you say, they've been away from their family in a tournament like this. They're born winners. De Bruyne's probably getting to the last chances of winning a major tournament with Belgium. the emotions are so high. People are so full of adrenaline and pumped. It's sometimes when you do get your best stuff, but I do find it sometimes harsh when we judge players and their reactions and by what they say post-match. Well, it's Bellingham's celebration the other day, or like calling him a spoiled brat, I thought was bang out of order. And I've been on that. You've been on that situation before when you've had someone go at you, and you do think, "Oh yeah, I do really. Oh, what a horrible person." But then you are like, actually, it's really hard for them. And I thought that was a bit much. The spoiled brat comment. I didn't think it deserved that, particularly a player of his quality and an intelligent player that you say always tries to give his all and really thinks about the game.
Yeah, and I think the goal, that question was just aimed to get a soundbite about something that is it's just been a sore point for Belgium for years, and it's not especially relevant now because, like Joe said, it's a completely different squad. You can't really talk about a golden generation when half of them aren't there anymore. So it's just, I feel like, we all have it where players stop after games and are happy to talk about some things, and you ask them about certain other things and they roll their eyes and sort of go, do we have to? And you've got a guy who's just maybe played his last ever game for Belgium. He doesn't know, got the real disappointment of going out to a game where they didn't deserve to lose, but equally a tournament where they never really got going. And he's being asked something that is just banal, really, to how he sees it. So, yeah, I think, even De Bruyne won't care, full stop, what he said about him. But I don't think, he has anything to worry about.
He also gave a really good detailed answer on the same subject about the golden generation. And like we said, that he said it's not the same team. We played different tactics. And the answers he gave after that game were actually quite measured and interesting and not what you would expect, and actually explained what he thought and what the team thought. But obviously, when he walks off and mutters the word stupid under his breath and the journalist then calls him a spoiled brat, that's going to be the headline. And he comes across as sort of a guy who's lost his temper and he storms out of a press conference and that is always going to get the headline. And we would write that as well if that had happened in front of us. But the answers that he has given over the last few days about a range of things about where he stands and his future and what he considers the last few years of his career is going to look like for club and country have been far more interesting than that one headline.
Yeah, there's something about a fired up De Bruyne though coming back to City, firing into pre-season, into the season, hopefully staying injury free. Is something I think that's I quite like the sound of though. That would fire up a lot of fear into opposition teams. Right, that's enough about the Euros. When we come back, we will talk about City transfers, ins and outs, and if it will ever stop being quiet. Welcome back to the Talking City podcast with myself, Gareth, Si and Joe. So on to transfers. We are now into July. We're now into like a new kind of 3-year window for the PRS, isn't it? And being able to do that. So we might see some clubs slowly starting to do things now, or particularly when the Euros finishes. I'm going to fire some names at you that have been doing the rounds, and some of them new, some of them not so new. But so I just wanted to give us a general update of where you feel City are.
It's been pretty slow. City really haven't done a lot. The Savio deal is expected to go through, but still hasn't been completed. And other than that, it's kind of, you get the sense at the end of every season that players are considering their options. And we've seen De Bruyne, Bernardo, Ederson think about leaving at the minute. As we've said for a while, they're more likely to stay. And the club are of the view that if they stay, then there's not major kind of additions that need to come in, and that's why we've seen them not bite at Bruno Guimaraes' release clause and things like that. So there's sort of you're not really looking at any kind of marquee arrivals because they would say that they have a marquee squad of players already.
You mentioned Guimaraes there. Do you think that's one that they're just going to slowly monitor and see how that pans out and who else has a sniff at him during the window? There's talk that maybe the figure for him might drop from the 100 million release clause maybe down to 85 mil. Is that just going to be a slow burner? City see what other people do and whether they'll get involved or not? Or do you think at one point they will go into attack?
The sort of from the conversations I'd had, I'd always got a sense that he was valued at nowhere near 100 million, and that unless Bernardo Silva or Kevin De Bruyne were coming in, were leaving, then City don't need to be spending that money there. So as it stands, I'd be surprised if they came in for him at all. They might. I think it obviously helps that the release clause has expired because now no one's talking about 100 million. I think Newcastle. Well, I mean, the point of a release clause it is sort of to get someone at a cheaper price a lot of the time. But I think with Bruno, it was kind of an acceptable price for Newcastle, and 100 million would have sorted their PSR business and meant that they weren't sort of scrambling around trying to sell anyone they could in the final week. But I would be surprised if City went for him this summer, unless anyone leaves, because who are you leaving out? That he just talks about a fired up De Bruyne returning. Well, he's probably going to get in the team ahead of Bruno. Rodri is, Bernardo Silva. You've got Phil Foden liking to play in the middle. There's not that much room for you to pay, 85, 80 million for someone to come in and watch City play.
Looking at other names that have come out of the woodwork this week, Gerard Branthwaite has been mentioned in City circles and saying Pep is a fan of how he plays, particularly his ability to bring the ball out from the back. He's been heavily linked with Manchester United, who have had a couple of cheeky bids rejected. Chelsea, as always, for any player seemingly, not just English player, seem to be sniffing around. Do we think there's anything in this, or is this Everton maybe trying to get the others to up their bids and try and get a deal done early by saying City could be sniffing around?
I always remember it was FA Cup just before COVID hit. Actually, City won at Sheffield Wednesday, and I can't remember the adjective used, but Pep Guardiola was describing Barry Bannon, and it was something like incredible or amazing. And it's no slight on Barry Bannon, but it's sort of this shorthand of Pep thinks he's a good player. Like we all use it, but Pep thinks like 1,000 million players are good players. He called Mateus Nunes one of the best players in the world, and then signed him and said, "Oh yeah, I didn't really mean that." So I don't think there's anything to be. I can completely see that Pep likes Branthwaite, but whether that means that City move for him again, I don't think so. You just have to sort of look at it again. Is he coming in for John Stones? Is he coming in for Ruben Diaz? Is he coming in for Akanji, for Ake? Right, then he's probably not worth spending that kind of money. Like you say, it's well known that United and Everton are far apart in their valuations of him. You can completely see that, he would be a player that City might like, but I think as far as this window is concerned, unless one of those four centre-backs that they've got, and that fella Josko Guardiola as well, who seems to be all right, unless 5 are leaving, there's no room for him.
Well, that's the other thing then, Joe, isn't it? Because, sorry, absolutely spot on there, but they're also being linked with other defenders as well. Ronald Araujo at Barcelona, rumoured at 102 million. What a snip is there. but again, is that just people putting 2 and 2 together and making 5? because of, say, the defence doesn't seem, maybe left back, doesn't seem to need to be touched.
Yeah, if they need a defender, it's probably another left back and a right back to succeed Kyle Walker. You've got Rico Lewis, but he wants to play midfield. Guardiola is at left back at the moment and doing very well, but it feels like they want him to play in centre back in the long term. So centre back seems like it's there for quite a while. Yeah, Stones is getting a bit older. Akanji as well. In the next few years, they will have to refresh it. But if they let's say they've got 100 million to spend this summer, centre back is not the position that you would do it. I think they would probably do need a midfielder to strengthen and add a bit of support for Rodri. But again, you like Simon said, you're not going to be spending tens of millions of pounds on someone to sit on the bench. When they spend that money, they spend it to challenge the first team. And there's a couple of examples where it hasn't worked, but largely they do get it right. And yeah, I just can't see those sort of numbers and those sort of players. And also City don't like getting involved in bidding wars, and they quite happily walk away from players that they like but don't feel are worth a certain amount of money. And it feels like Branthwaite falls into that category rather than a cheap, easy deal and someone who might well be a very good player in the future, but doesn't feel like he's the right fit right now.
Let me throw another name at you, just because they're floating around, and I'm just going to throw them out. Joshua Kimmich, the German.
I mean, he's probably a bit more of the type of player that they might go for, but there was a lot of noise at the start of the window, wasn't there? And it's gone quiet. He's quite versatile. He'd help. I do think they need more bodies this season for the amount of games that I mentioned before. If you're playing up to 80 odd games, you're going to need rotation and more options. And if you've got a squad of 20, 21, it might not be enough. And they look very tired towards the end of last season. But yeah, Kimmich feels. I don't know what you think, Si, but he would fit in. But also, if they don't get him, I don't think they would mind too much.
Yeah, strikes to me like a Kovacic, like experienced performer. We know that Pep likes him because he's actually managed him before, so that's another tick in the box. I think he would fit in very well, but equally, he will. They will survive without him. It's sort of City nearly signed Dani Alves in 2017, and that was kind of. He was like on a plane over here and then just kind of kept going and went to Paris. And at the time, it felt like a disaster. And, City just moved on, like you say, because they are good at these things with the recruitment. And they move on and sign someone else. And Danilo didn't really sort of break the internet when he came, but he came for a few years and they sold him on for a profit. So it was... It was a deal that was fine. Like Kimmich would be decent, but there's no danger if he doesn't come. I think it's interesting because Kimmich would sort of be taking the game time of someone like Rico Lewis, I think. So City kind of have to. I agree they do need more bodies in, but they also have to think about pathways for certain players.
Just wrapping up what's happened since we last had a podcast, none of these a particular surprise, just some of the outs. Taylor, Harwood, Bellis, his move confirmed. We knew it was happening after Southampton were promoted, but obviously going into July 1st, it was confirmed with 20 million transfer to Southampton after their promotion back to the Premier League. We've obviously seen Tommy Doyle go as well with Wolves, and confirmed today again. You can read on the Manchester Evening News Manchester City section of our website. Lewis Fiorini has gone to Stockport on a $1 million loan after a couple of loan periods over the last couple of years in League One. Looking at another names that have been obviously out on loan the last couple of years, James McAtee, where do we think his future is, and potentially how big is the pre-season tour in deciding that for him?
Yeah, huge. He went out on loan 2 years ago to Sheffield United when City weren't so keen on him going there, I think is fair to say. And he proved them wrong and got Sheffield United promoted, or played a big hand in them getting promoted. Last year he went back to Sheffield United. Again, I'm not sure that was the best move for him. He made of it what he did, and he's got the chance in pre-season with kind of De Bruyne and Bernardo Silva absent to convince City he can be a part of their plans for this season. There's a hell of a lot of interest in him already. Chelsea have already inquired with City about him. There's a few Champions League clubs in other leagues that have done so. I think all three promoted teams have as well. So, if he wants regular football or more regular football, then that is on offer. But the chance to make it at City is still there. I think he would have played Oscar Bob's minutes if he'd stayed last year, but he didn't, and Oscar Bob took all of his opportunities. So now it's a big test for McAtee to see if he is good enough to make it at City.
I think he's got a real opportunity. I think that with the extra games, I think he will manage the minutes of De Bruyne and Rodri and Bernardo a bit more. I think he's going to be an option who can get maybe half an hour here and there and cup games and the occasional start. I wonder if City will look at what happened with Cole Palmer. They were happy enough to let him go for that amount of money, but probably saw him and what he did at Chelsea and thought maybe he could have done. We've spoken about the Palmer dilemma a lot, and he wouldn't have got the same minutes at City as Chelsea, but I wonder if that will play into City's thinking if a big offer did come in. And again, with all the games they're playing, I think it would be silly to let a player go who can play in the Premier League, who knows the City style, knows these players, and is probably a bit of cover across the midfield and attacking positions, which they don't necessarily have. He's a different type of player that Oscar Bob is and other players like that. So I hope he does have a good pre-season. I hope he does show what he's learned at Sheffield United, and I've got a feeling that relegation season will actually have done him a favour in terms of maybe toughening him up and showing him that it's not always winning Champions Leagues and Premier League titles. There is another side to football. So I wonder if this pre-season is going to sort of see a new side of McAtee, and I think it's going to be an interesting few weeks for him.
And when you mention Palmer, he is in that bracket. If you're talking about the best players that have come through City Academy, you talk about Foden and then Palmer and McAtee. There are other very good players who've come through and other sort of players that they've made a lot of money out of. But McAtee is up there, and City really won't want to waste that. But it's ultimately on the player to convince City that he can play a part for them. Because, really, you talk about De Bruyne and Bernardo, well, neither of them are going to be around forever. So if McAtee can show this season that he can be a part of the future, then it looks bright. And I know City would love nothing more than, a midfield with McAtee, Rico Lewis and Phil Foden. But looking beyond this season, there are even more opportunities. But you've got to do it over the next 6 weeks.
Right, chaps. Thanks a lot. We'll leave it there for this week. Joe and Si, many thanks for your thoughts. Do follow the guys with all the latest news at manchestereveningnews.co.uk. And do sign up for that newsletter or join the City WhatsApp community. All the latest news you will get sent straight to your email box or your phone. Get alerts for the latest news and opinions, so you won't miss a beat. So do join up to those communities and newsletters as well. Thank you for listening. We'll speak to you next week.